Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And my plea and my hope moving forward is that music and the musicians are put at the forefront of our society. Their nonverbal vibrational ability to heal people is essential in this time. It gets people out of their thinking mind, it gets people out of their heart space, and it allows them to drop into the primordial gut. And when you enter the spirit mind, all logic is off at that point, and you're leading with all types of multisensory love and just the ability to bring people together. And some cats might say this is Pollyannish, but I just believe that at this point it's really our only hope. And I get a chance today to speak to a guy who really came up at a time when music was seen as a viable profession. It was not seen as a musician's gift to the world, or playing for the door, or paying to play. My guest has experience as a road dog in the academy with Seminole Cats, and then also being a pivotal player on a lot of albums that got me into music in general. At the forefront on Muse, Wrapped in a Cloud with Gil Goldstein. When I first saw that and heard that record, I realized, I'm like, there are some really eccentric people in this world, and I really want to be a part of this. And I'm not a musician, but I get a chance today to continue on my journey, chronicling an amazing heritage that this country has, the modern art form of melodic improvisation and music. Mark Egan, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hello, Jake, and thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you, man. You know, I wanted you to talk a little bit about what your intentions were and what they remain today as far as getting in, why you got into music.
It's a very good question, Jake. And I think I first got into music. This is in the 60s, actually, when I was in high school and listening to all the music that was on the radio at the time, which was the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Cream, Led Zeppelin, and the likes of those. And that was pop radio at the time. That was, you turn on, top 10 AM radio, and that's what it was. And for some reason, even though I was a trumpet player since I was 10 years old, around my early teens, I started to really key in on bass guitar. When I would listen to those songs, I would really focus on the bass, and that led one thing to another. But I bought a bass and started playing. But I was just attracted to the wave of the music, because really that was the original jam band. I mean, Hendrix and Cream, they're just jamming, and they went for it. It wasn't a commercial music in any way, really. It was just, they were just playing because that's what they did. And so I was attracted to that, and I went down and studied music at the University of Miami as a trumpet player, but I also brought my bass. But early on, I became aware of the power of music. I'll never forget, because I was listening to a local radio station, WBCN in Boston. And at that time, and it's totally different now. Everything is compartmentalized. But during that time, you could turn on FM radio, and in the same show, you might hear Jimi Hendrix, because I just named that name. And then you might hear Miles Davis, some very avant-garde Miles Davis. And then you'd hear Alan Watts reciting his writings.
This is fantastic. God.
Of, existentialism and the meaning of life. And then you'd hear Ravi Shankar playing something. So, when I say I'm a baby boomer, that's what I was booming to, to that music. So
I just want to read this to you, because I'm so glad. I wasn't sure where you were from, but we just lost the late, great Mark Levine, the piano player. And
yeah.
And when I interviewed him, he said, the only station I truly remember was WBGH, because on their television side, Herb Pomeroy had a weekly show which I played on 2 or 3 times. Whoever was playing at the workshop at the time would play a half-hour show. Guys like McCoy Tyner, Sonny Rollins. I actually have tapes I made from those shows. I attached some alligator clips to a speaker wires inside the TV. You couldn't do that today. You'd probably electrocute yourself. I mean, did the idea that we could walk down the street and ask 20 people what our definition of the word jazz is and get 20 different answers, but jazz was still a popular American art form when you were booming at that time, right? I mean, not
very much so.
And that what I consider jazz, which is, improvisation, leaving the head of the tune and improvising, that's what Cream and Jimmy were doing, even though it wasn't American Songbook, and I kind of wanted you to talk about viscerally, just sort of vibrationally, how forget the textbooks or the classroom or the bandstand, but just how much that vibration helped you internalize improvisational music.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that when I finally really got tuned into mainstream jazz and the real progressive jazz of Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Charlie Parker, but the contemporary people that were happening, I realized that these were great improvisers. It was a language, and it was a music that I was just drawn to. I didn't know why. I just wanted to be around it. I wanted to study it. I realized that there was a certain depth to it that I didn't have, that I wanted to be able to be versatile, to be able to communicate within that language, And I'll never forget the first time I listened to John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. And I had headphones on, and it hit me. And I said, that's when I realized that these people are communicating to each other in this very sophisticated language of jazz, and that this is an extremely high level of creativity. It's spontaneous music of the moment within this song form and then these structures that they put together. And I think you really have to study or listen a lot to jazz to be able to get that feeling from it. And when you do, there's no turning back, because you realize this is heavy and these people are really saying something, and it's a true art form. And so I realized that, and then I was just gone from there. I just was practicing 8 hours a day, and I was at the University of Miami, as I mentioned. So I practiced all the time. I just lived music.
You picked up. No, well, of course. I mean, it's the forever journey, but I mean, in the sense that I remember when I interviewed McLaughlin, he said it took him a year to figure out musically what Train was doing on Love Supreme. I just think that, in general, compared to what you would hear, I mean, in a lot of folk music, you wouldn't even have a trap set per se. But was the conversational piece of Coltrane even more evident because of the conversation that was going on with the rhythm section? I mean, it wasn't your traditional, bass and drums kind of thing. It was just like sheets of sound.
Right. And I think that the universal thread that goes through all of us, which is not unlike the universal thread that's in all of mankind, is the living energy in everyone that's happening. And with music, especially the medium of music, of sound, permeates everything and is extremely powerful. And it's something that I realized by listening to not only people like Coltrane, very sophisticated jazz, but also listening to Crosby, Stills and Nash and Joni Mitchell and Ravi Shankar, especially Indian music. I got very into Indian philosophy and yoga and meditating, and that, just when you say Om, which I do a lot with Krishna Das. I perform with Krishna Das, the great kirtan master.
Of course.
And so it's in everything. All music that has a certain devotionalness to it is the core of that center of the thing that attracts me to music. That if people are playing honest music and it's in its purity, that's the same throughout everything. When Miles Davis plays one long note, or Coltrane plays Coltrane ballads, it doesn't have to be fast.
Right.
It's that sound in it that attracts me, and especially since I play bass. Some people might not know who Mark Egan is, but I'm a bass player, and
a badass bass player. I totally do.
Anything because this world is crazy.
It is, no doubt, man. I mean, there's sleepers. There's sleepers everywhere. There's unsung cats everywhere. So
Exactly.
I mean, you're one of the cats.
Well, but thank you. But through playing, especially fretless bass, I feel the drone quality of that instrument has a very strong attraction to me, and it's something that I've really pursued and I continue to pursue. And it's not unlike chanting Om to me, playing music. It's a very spiritual thing. When I pick up the instrument, it's a very spiritual experience for me, and I'm going for it. And that's the way I've always felt about it. And I've always pursued being around creative musicians and it doesn't have to be jazz creative. Any players that really love to play and have facility to play and really say something, I'm into it. So
I dig.
That leaves a lot of open doors for me,
Did you? I mean, I know you were, because you went to Miami at a very seminal time. I mean, I think Gil was there, right, and maybe Metheny was there. I'm not sure who was there at the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just curious about like, the idea of when you. I mean, I know that at Wesleyan, for instance, I mean, they had like residencies with Ali Akbar Khan and the Muktananda. They'd bring in all these Indian musicians, in some cases gurus or teachers. And I'm just wondering, like, when you got hip to not just the timeless music of India, but also like when that cyclical rhythm, if you were already sort of dwelling on that in Miami or even before in Boston.
For me, everything opened up when I went to the University of Miami in 1969, and I was attracted there because there was a great head of the jazz department. His name is Jerry Coker, and he's one of the revered jazz educators and a very inspired person. So he attracted a lot of musicians. I could have gone to Berkeley in Boston or other, North Texas State, but I was attracted to him. And so when I got down there, Gil Goldstein was there. Pat Metheny was a student at one time. Danny Gottlieb, Clifford Carter, great keyboard player. Hiram Bullock, another guitar player. Steve Morse, who has the Dixie Dregs band, which is a famous Southern rock progressive band. And so, all these people were there, and everybody wanted to learn. And Jerry Coker was there. Also, Whit Seidner was the teacher there, who became head of the jazz department. And so I actually took private lessons with Jerry Coker. I was a baby. I was an infant, believe. But I was open. I was an open vessel, and I wanted to learn. And I knew that it was greatness there that I wanted to get into. So it attracted those people, and it was an amazing time when you think of it. 1969, what was happening in the world. It's like the greening of America, and musically,
it was an explosive music. I mean, I was born in '78. Yeah. I mean, but it's like the. Well, I mean, were you guys playing like? Can you please? I mean, this was a little This was obviously pre-disco, thank God. But I mean, were you playing like? Can you talk about some of these upholstered sewers that you guys would be playing once you got out of class? I mean, the Academy was so different back then. I mean, going back to Berkeley, Charlie Mariano would get off the road and go to the Schillinger House in '69 when it was known as that, and and either clean himself up and get off junk or learn a new instrument and then go back on the road. He was already considered a professional. And it was, and Schillinger was more of a trade school. And even the philosophies of Santisi, Herb Pomeroy, I mean, the way they taught the cats was completely different. And then the guys would wind up going to the combat zone or the workshop or wherever they could play all the time live. And where were you guys playing live in Miami?
Well, there were a lot of opportunities in Miami to play that ranged from little lounges in Coral Gables and down in Coconut Grove to other venues in Miami, around Miami Beach. But mostly Miami Beach was hotels with shows. So there was a whole vocational aspect available there, which I did a lot of things at the Fontainebleau and at the Doral and those different, the Carillon Hotel. I don't even know if they're there now, but so they would have a national act come in every week. So, you know, Robert Goulet would be there.
Wow.
We'd back up Bobby Vinton,
Wow.
Frankie Avalon, Fabian, all these guys. And you'd have to learn the book in one day at the rehearsal. So that's how I cut my teeth on really reading and being professional. And I was playing 7 nights a week while I was going to school there, and in between playing at those little funky clubs all around. So there were a lot of places to play, and you could go and jam at different places, you know, and it's a whole different scene than it is now.
Well, I mean, more to the point, like, I mean, those cats were not traveling with their bands. I mean, they'd pick up a rhythm section where they were going locally.
Correct.
And that's what's different. I mean, that's the point, is that the idea that you had to think about that. I mean, yeah, you're in class and you're learning from Coker and you're getting inspired and you're with your peers, but then all of a sudden you're given the songbook to to Goulet, and you got to learn that because you're going to be on the bandstand then. Recommendations for the revitalization of live, spiritual, consistent, burning music.
People need to support live music, and you have to have venues, whether it be clubs. I think a lot of what killed it, and I was just down, I'm in Florida at the moment,
mm-hmm.
and I was down in the Keys in early December, and I went to a hotel and went to a few other restaurants and everything. And every place that I went, rather than when I was, in the 70s, when I would go to one of those, a bar by a pool or something, there would be a little band, a drummer, a bass player, a guitar player, or a keyboard player. Now there's one person with a drum machine or pre-recorded tape, a guitar player playing to the people. And that seems, people are okay with that for some reason. So there you've just gotten 3 musicians or 2 musicians out of work. I think the advent of technology is part to blame for this because of technology of drum machines and recording. And so now people can do that. And people don't know the difference between hearing a live band and that, even though, of course, there's a huge difference. So
you're absolutely right. That's a very good point. Their ears don't, like my daughters, they're inculcated with all sorts of insane music. So their ears are open, but most younger kids, they cannot even tell if there's electronic instrumentation in the, and that to me, it's like, okay, that's cool. I just, part of my show is, it's not about preservation. It's about the promotion of how real music is made. And I just don't see real music being able to be made, with, the other thing is just like studio time is so much more expensive. There's a lot of factors, and it seemed to make a lot. I mean, you had no doubt that you were going to be a professional musician when you went to school.
No, and there was always work. And when I moved to New York in 1976, there was always work. There were gigs around. It wasn't for a lot of money, and I didn't want to I wasn't in it for the money. I never have been. I just wanted to play creative music, and there were a lot of, and like I said, I was about to say, the dichotomy of music and the music business. Even when you have a gig in a club, let's say, and let's say it's a jazz gig, you can't necessarily just play free jazz all night because you'll never come back to that club. So you can't really do what you want to do, even at that.
Right.
But that in itself is better than not. And the main thing is you're at your instrument playing on a consistent basis, and that leads to other things. It leads to growth of the instrument, of yourself, camaraderie, playing with other people, and so that's why those type of experiences are so important. Jake, I don't know what the answer is, other than saying people should open up jazz clubs and, hotels should have live musicians back.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's a huge
economical.
part of it. Every hotel, every Holiday Inn, this, and this it was always 3 sets a night, live band, and then obviously DJs came in. I mean, anyway, Mark, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. Take a listen to it and then pay attention to the content, and we'll come back.
Spiritual thing is basically when you're playing, and it's just not bebop. This is other music too, but bebop in jazz is probably, that's the high end of what we do as jazz musicians. But just the spirituality comes from it's like something. Now this may sound abstract, but it's something that Wayne Shorter said to me one time. He said that the only way you can really, really, really play is that you have to go to the store and buy some milk for your grandmother. When he said that to me and the drummer, Omar Hakim, now he had a few drinks, we were all drinking.
Right.
I said, wow. But a couple days later it hit me, because, it's like to come, if you have one of those kind of families, you go to see your grandmother, she says, go to the store and get me some milk, and you go there, there's a love, there's a love for something other than just what you're looking at. It's like your own personal love, which could come from God, which could come from the force of life. It could be whatever it is that you think makes you tick. That if you tap into that, whatever that is, it's not a material. It's not the instrument. It's not the notes. It's the life force. And that is very, when you operate on that band, that's or on that frequency in life, that is very spiritual.
Mark Egan, he plays the same instrument as you. Do you want to take a guess? And he plays bass.
Gary Willis?
That was my first interview with Stanley Clark, and I wanted you to talk about, he's talking about Wayne Shorter saying, go to the store to get your grandma some milk. I would, even if when you moved to New York in 76, and like you said, you weren't ever in it for the money. You were in it to play, you said creative music. I also would say, you're looking for people that you can connect with on the same frequency. And I just wanted you to talk about that sort of an opportunity in your life that you had. It's very lucky, even one time, to come together in an ensemble or a trio, whatever, and to operate within that life force. And I was just hoping you could talk about a time when you were playing in a band and you were going to the store to get your grandma some milk.
Sure. I think the band that I was in that first really nurtured that type of feeling about really playing for the music, and was playing with Phyllis Hyman. She's was a singer.
Sure.
She's passed.
Yeah.
And I actually moved to New York with that band, Phyllis Hyman and the PH Factor, and it was with Clifford Carter playing keyboards and Hiram Bullock on guitar, and Bill Bowker played drums. And we were, even though we played a lot of lounges and jazz clubs with her, we'd have an extended residency usually at places that we play around the Miami area. And then when we moved to New York, we went to a club up in the in the hundreds, I think, off of Amsterdam, called Russ Brown's. That was the name of it.
Wow.
But we were going for it. So even though we were playing a lot of R&B hits, whenever it would be time to solo, it would either go into James Brown land or Miles or Chick, and it was okay because Phyllis brought us back, but we were, young stallions wanted to just go. So whenever we had a chance, I would start playing a Love Supreme,
I need Mark, can you foist some tapes on? I got to hear some of this stuff. This is where it's at, man.
I got to find some.
I mean, but the point is, when you say going for it as a group, like talk about those intangibles. They obviously you want to have trust. You need to have rapport. But like, if you wanted to make a right turn, like a flock of birds, everybody would go with you. Like that's the magic. And I just wanted you to talk about the antecedents in order to get to a place. I mean, clearly Phyllis was super cool too, because a lot of band leaders would be like, we're just going to play a formula trip and we're just going to get through the songs. And she's like, no, you guys can play as many bars as you want. So I just want you to talk about the antecedent of playing that kind of music.
Well, I think the antecedent would be the drummer that I played with, Bill Bowker. We played, he and I were a rhythm section team for about 4 years in Miami, playing with the jazz band there, playing a lot of the shows on the beach, doing a lot of jamming and recording as well. So we really had a telepathic rhythm section relationship where we knew where each other would be going next, and we knew how to complement or lead or pull. And we were also very aware. We played with a really great group in Florida called the Baker's Dozen, which was led by Ira Sullivan and Vince Maggio. And that was a band of of all the heavy players. I want to say, not that I was a heavy player, but there were all the top players in Miami. It was called Baker's Dozen. And so we played in that band, but it was also, it made me spoil going to New York because I couldn't find what I already had in Miami in a lot of ways, But anyway, that's another story. But Billy and I had a great hookup, so we brought that into the Phyllis Hyman group, along with Clifford Carter, who we'd done a lot of jamming and playing with. So we had a lot of experience playing a lot of different styles of music and doing a lot of free playing, as well as playing jazz and playing funk and rock. So Phyllis was very malleable in a way, in that if we went places, she would go with us. Vocally.
That is so hip. That is the hippest thing. So hip.
Because we would play things from Return to Forever. We did Spain, and which is a big thing in 72, 73, 74. And so we'd play that, and she would sort of solo on it, and then we would go and play on it and we had the aspirations of playing like Return to Forever. So
you had the chops, man. I love it.
Yeah, those were our mentors, which was Stanley, who just spoke a minute ago,
right.
and
Lenny White
and Ayrto,
yep.
Lenny and Ayrto as well, and
Joe Farrell. Yeah, that's right, totally.
And Joe, and I've been so lucky in my career because I got to play with Ayrto and record with him, travel and tour with him, as well as Joe Farrell and so many great players, Lenny White. But
let's just talk about that because you know what. I interviewed Ayrto 11 years ago when I started my show, and Joe Farrell was one of the, with Wrapped in the Cloud. He did a couple of great albums in the late 70s that really hooked me into jazz music. Talk about those two guys in particular, about Ayrto. I mean, his dad was literally a shaman. He was like a musical healer in Brazil. I just wonder, can you talk about those two individually? Because I just think that Ayrto's, thank God he's still with us, but Joe left us, and Joe was really, I don't need to tell you this, but based on history, I mean, it was pretty daunting. I mean, they were kind of like, he took the mantle of Coltrane,
Yes, he did. And there's some videos you can find on YouTube of Joe playing. There's some playing duo with Elvin Jones and Joe Farrell.
Absolutely. Jimmy Garrison on bass, maybe?
Yep. It gives me chills just talking about it because, and I played for about a year and a half on the road with Joe. I did a recording with Joe with Ayrto's band in Florida, and Kei Akagi, great keyboard player.
Wow.
But, I was always, I'll never forget first listening to the Miles Davis record, Bitches Brew, but I think it was Live Evil, and that's where I first heard Ayrto playing percussion. And I said, wow, this is an expanded universe of percussion.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he then came out with playing drums on the Return to Forever, Light as a Feather.
Oh my God!
Ayrto's playing the drums on Spain, and he's a great drummer.
No, he's really fantastic. I completely agree.
And we crossed paths on the road when I was with the Pat Metheny group. We would do a double billing sometimes with Ayrto and Pat Metheny group, and that's when I got to really meet him and spend time with him. And then that later led to me playing on the road with Airto and recording with him. And what a thrill to play with Airto playing drums. And that's how I learned Brazilian samba playing. And, you know, that's the real deal right there.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, you guys are pros, but, you know, was that basically sort of, can you talk about, you learned on the bandstand pretty much? I mean, was there sometimes that word, the R word is a dirty word, rehearsal. Did you guys rehearse a lot, or was it basically you were feeling your way through the samba groove?
Yeah, no, we maybe rehearsed one time before we went out one afternoon. It wasn't extensive. And then we went out and hit it and played. But, you know, a lot of it is, I'm a big studier, you know, like if I know that I'm going to be playing with Airto, like a tour coming up, I'll go and I'll ask them what tunes are we going to be doing on the tour, and I'll go and I'll find the recordings and I'll learn it cold before I even go in. So I'm ready to hit it. So whether it's obsessive compulsiveness, I'm not sure, but it's also not wanting to stink, you know, not wanting to be bad. I want to be
absolutely,
good as I can
dude.
be.
Come on, man. I mean, you're just getting prepared, man.
So, and around that time, there was no tape players. It was, you know, mainly just dropping the needle on a record. And then later it was cassette players, and then, you know, everything else in there. But so to shorten the story, I would do a lot of homework before I was going to do a tour with someone so that we could get together, do a rehearsal, just sort of go over how you want to do the form, because usually it's different from a live recording or the recording because you extend it and open up different sections. So that's sort of how it went with Airto. But I learned so much from night to night, Jake. That's the thing. And hearing how he put the energy into different parts of the rhythm of a samba beat with the way that he would play the kick drum and the backbeat and things like that. And, you know, just it's on the job training.
Yeah, well, no, I mean that it was, and that is just. And then was Joe on that tour too, or that was a different gig with when you played with Joe?
Joe was on the band. Joe was in the band. We played tour with Joe, and then.
What year was this, by the way?
This is like let me think. Late '80s.
I mean, because Joe didn't live. He was gone by the. I don't know when he passed on, but he was. I don't know, that is such a magical sort of literally return to forever without, you know, that was like the original Cats. I mean, people forget that Airto and Damu Ramao and Joe were those original Cats in that. Oh no, Dom might have been in Weather Report. Anyway,
yeah.
it didn't matter. That is so freaking cool, man.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And then Danny Gottlieb also came in and played drums with Airto, and Airto played percussion, and they would switch off sometimes.
Oh my God, that is filthy stuff.
And then Danny and I, with our group Elements, we had Airto and Flora play on one of our records. It's called Spirit River is the name of the record, Elements Spirit River. And Airto's on that and plays his classic tambourine solos. We got him to do a tambourine solo.
Oh my, I love this, dude. Is that now Live Evil? Was that the first time that you became aware of Steve Grossman?
I heard Grossman on Bitches Brew.
Right.
I think he's on Bitches Brew.
I don't know if he's on Bitches Brew. I don't think he is.
He was on Jack Johnson. I know that.
Definitely.
And I got to play and record with Steve Grossman.
Well, that's why I asked. I mean, that dude was part of that Jewish saxophone mafia contingent with Liebman and, you know, Brecker and those cats.
Yeah, Grossman was an incredible musician, and there was a loft scene in New York when I got there in '76 where we would do jam sessions, and I used to go over to Bill Evans, a saxophone player. He was a couple streets away to his loft in a building, which is basically like a big open space, almost like you'd have manufacturing in it. You know, it's like that type of thing.
Sure.
And so we would play, and Grossman would come over and play, and through that, he invited me to record on his record called Perspectives. And That Victor Lewis is on that. Marcus Miller also plays bass on it. Lenny White plays on it, and it sounds like Steve Grossman is going to blow the microphone apart. He played with such intensity.
Oh my!
It still gives me chills just talking about it. He's unbelievable, and all the work that he did with Miles is just so great. Steve Grossman.
I mean, I feel fortunate. Gene Perla hooked me up with him. I think I did the only interview ever with Grossman, and
really?
I'll send it to you. It's so tripped out because I got him out of his thinking mind for a minute. Things kind of got warbly later, but he told me. I mean, he was like, he was the one that told me that he was like, Coltrane used to take his teeth out. He'd play on his gums. It blew my mind when anyway, that Grossman is, he was on a different planet. Now the loft scene, Egan was cooking the groove. You were in Boston in 67, 68. The loft scene in New York at that time, that goes back to Liebman, Lenny White, Dave Holland, Chick Corea,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of wild stuff. Now, this loft scene with Bill Evans, yourself, was it Lower West Side? Where was it happening? And
it was in Chelsea, and it was Dave Liebman's old loft that Bill took over.
I love this. Oh my God!
So there was a lot of history there.
So
we would just play and play and play. No tunes, just go. Just play.
Mm.
And I remember Grossman there, and that record, Perspectives. People should check that out.
Dude, I don't see that much, man. I don't see that record around at all. I mean, I only collect vinyl, and,
okay, yeah.
and I need to get my hands on that because when I saw you played with him, when you talk, I also, this is really instructive because I've done a bunch of interviews with Leland Sklar, the great bass player from the
Lee, yeah,
Lee, he'll be pre-pandemic. We were talking. He'll be in sessions with. And they're taking 4 hours just to get a bass drum sound down, and it's like I can't imagine with Steve Grossman, was everything a first take? Can you talk about a jazz like a real deal jazz recording session and what that's about? Because my generation and younger, because the technology is so superior, there's just a lot of perseverating on perfection instead of focusing on the actual burning element of the music.
Right. Well, in the case of the Steve Grossman record, we had gotten together at Kikuchi was a piano player at his loft, all these lofts, and we rehearsed, went over the tunes and everything. So when we got to the session at Electric Lady Studios in New York, Jimi Hendrix's old studio,
my God,
it was just a matter of getting some basic sounds, which takes a couple hours to get the headphones and everything, but usually within an hour and a half, you're ready to start doing takes. So they were first or second takes. It wasn't belabored, and everybody was playing pretty much live, even though we had separation with the instruments. But I don't think I overdubbed anything. I think I doubled my bass on a couple things. So it went really fast. And another example of a jazz recording session was the Pat Metheny group. This is a classic example. All on the first White album, they were first or second takes. All that record we pretty much just went in and played it down.
That is awesome. That is freaking great. Was that the plan? Was that the way you guys had always been? Was that the first time you recorded as that group?
Yes, and we had been touring for a year, almost every day of the year, about 300 days a year. So we had evolved within the arrangements and the forms and just the way it was going, so that when we got to Norway, Oslo, Norway, where ECM, Manfred Eicher is the producer who produces these records on ECM, we pretty much were ready to go. And I think he wanted to open things up and make it more European sounding, and we were an American, I don't know what to call it. It's not just jazz, because it was more chamber music or whatever, just the instrumentation and the concept was different.
Totally.
But we just that whole record we did, I think, in 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 days, with the mixing and everything. But that's fast.
I just want you brought up a really interesting point. It's actually kind of out of the Grateful Dead playbook, and I want you to talk about how maybe take a particular song on that album, because you talked about, before you went to the studio to record, these songs were already live ready. I mean, they had taken on a life of their own. And so many cats today, they record an album, then they feel compelled to have to play the song the same way it is on the record. But when you are testing out these songs live, 300 dates a year, they take on a life of their own. All of a sudden, there are parts that are included that didn't even exist before because you've been playing. Can you just talk about how, if there was any songs that, if you can remember from the beginning when you started playing them, that once you got on the road and started to really get them live ready, that new parts were created, or basically when you went in and recorded them, they were completely different from the original conception?
Yes, and so when we first got together to play with the Pat Metheny group, we went up to Boston to, Danny and Lyle had a house that they rented, and we rehearsed there. And Lyle and Pat had been working on some arrangements. We played some of Pat's songs that he had recorded on Bright Size Life, which is the record he did with Jocko and Bob Moses, as well as Watercolors was his next record with Eberhard Weber playing bass and Danny and Lyle. So, and then we did the Pat Metheny group. So there were some sketches as well of new songs, and I've heard board tapes throughout that year before we recorded, and I couldn't believe how different the song was from when we first played it in the studio. And it kept evolving because we were very conscientious players as a group. It was a real group, and we would talk about the songs after the shows every night.
I love this. This is great.
Why don't you do this? Why don't we try this here? Why don't we do this? So let's extend this. Lyle would come up with a better background thing. We'd add a different section. So by the time we got to the studio, it was a completely different thing other than some of the basic melodies and chords,
Well, I think that's the way. Why do people not? I mean, I know you guys were conscientious and obviously schooled. You had the rudiments. I mean, you talked about playing free before, but in order to play really good free music, you have to have your rudiments. But why do people not record more? I think that's the freshest way to record music. I mean, that's just like the most. Of course, not everybody has the luxury of playing 300 live gigs a year. But still,
well, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yes. I mean, ideally, it would be good to get together and play the songs and try to play them as much as possible to flush out what feels right and make it evolve, and then go in and record. But you don't always have the luxury of that, and the timing, of it. Jake, this is in 1977, and you could go out in a van, which we had, and drive all over the country, which is what we did, and go from gig to gig. And, we were getting paid $50 a night, starting out.
Each of you, or for the band?
Each of us.
Okay. That's okay. That's a
couple $100 a night for the band.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, but it ranged in different things, and it gradually evolved and became more. But, it was easy to do that then. It's really hard to do that now because there are no clubs to go from here to there it's going back to what we were talking about before, where how can we make it better and have more venues for music, live music, not only jazz, but every type of music.
Absolutely.
And it's got to come from the industry. It's got industry meaning entertainment, like hotels, restaurants, all of that. It has to be reprogrammed,
It does have to be reprogrammed. I have having a ball here with Mark Egan. I got another Name That Voice for you, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
Well, I don't think that compassion was an issue at that time for that transition, that recovery. There was a split. There was a polarity that came to the surface of the experience itself. And the polarity was the past, when that tumor did exist. And now, at that time, from this point, it still is the past, but then it wasn't the past. It was a change. And I saw a total difference between what was beginning to emerge and what existed prior to the event that caused the transition. And what was beginning to emerge had certain faults in itself. And one of the strongest of them was the lack of retainment, the lack of memory.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I had to really focus more on the moment than depend on expectations of something that I thought should be there. That's when change really began to take place. And I began to focus more upon pleasure of the moment, the simplicity of now. Had no disruption, no distraction by thoughts that came from the past, fears of something that might happen in the future. The only thing that really existed was in the now. And was the birth of that realization that turned into a perspective that became the issue, became my priority from that point forward, and still is to this day. It comes down to focus upon the moment and the pleasure of life itself without the extension into any kind of distractions. So I think compassion has something to do with that, along with all of the other virtues that I think.
Mr. Egan, you want to take a guess at who that is?
Oh, it's dear Pat Martino.
You got, dude, my dearest Uncle Pat, man. Rest in peace.
Yes.
The floor is yours. Listen, the floor is yours, man. Please talk about Pat. And I know that I feel like I just sensed that you guys not only crossed paths, but must have played together.
Oh, I toured with Pat for a year, and it was some of the best playing of my life. You know, and every word he just said is so true.
I played that for you, Egan.
Thank you. And it's about being in the moment, and it's all about being in the moment. Yeah. No matter whether you play music or whatever you do, to be in the moment. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a social situation where, you know, you're around people and you think you're having a conversation, but the person is just talking about themselves. Or
absolutely, dude. Totally.
There's no in the moment of talking about what it is or that. And, you know, just in music especially, think about it. As an improvising musician reacting to everybody, you have to be in the moment. If you're not in the moment, you're out of it. You can't play music because it's all happening. You've got to be reacting and paying close attention to everything that's happening. And that's how, as I mentioned, playing with Bill Bowker and drums, and especially Danny Gottlieb, my bro, and playing with Arjun, the tabla player, we're focused on that moment. And it's like looking at a candle, this musical candle, and it's the energy in that, and you're just surrendering to that. And that's real love. That, to me, that's love.
You're nailing it. We're getting the poetry now flowing out of you.
Yes, but that's what it is.
I know.
For me. And that,
I know.
Pat described it so perfectly, so eloquently, and playing with him was such a joy. And you know, it's something, Jake, that I noticed from the first gig we did together. We played New York at Birdland, I think, and we were at the sound check, and he said, "Okay, let's play Impressions, John Coltrane song, you know."
Yeah.
And he starts off, and it's like a freight train, and he just played nonstop, and it was like it was the performance. It wasn't, you know, just playing a note, pecking a note, and checking the sound system. Whenever he played, he was in it, and he was gone. And you know, for me as a bass player, it was a great challenge to provide a foundation for his playing, you know, and I'll never forget all the moments that I've had with him. And we had some great hangs. We toured in Europe and Japan, and we spent a lot of time, you know, before and after the gigs talking and hanging, and it was just talking about things that he just said.
Dude, I'm so glad because that I did about 5 or 6 interviews with him, and it was all deep philosophy. And a lot of people, younger cats, they when they were with Pat, they would never really talk that much. So it's really cool that you guys. I mean, you guys were he was a elder of yours, but still, I mean, the man was like he put me on my path. I love that dude, and I also realized like. Did you know him? Were you hip to him when he was recovering from the aneurysm? I mean, that's the whole vexing thing about Pat is that, like Joe Pesci showed up at the Blue Note 20 years ago and was like, "Hey, Pat, do you remember me?" And Pat's like, he's like, "Yeah, you're Joe Pesci. You're." He's like, "No, you don't really know who I am." He's like, "Yeah, you're a movie star." And he's like. No, Pat. He's like, I was a doo-wop singer, and I used to come to Small's Paradise, and you used to order a mint julep when you were playing with Willis Jackson, and I'd come see you. His memory was just out, and that rehabilitation was, and then he did it, and and then he played his ass off for years after that. And then I talked to him maybe, I don't know, more than a year ago at least, and he needed a double lung transplant. He couldn't play. They were worried that if they did the transplant, he wouldn't make it. He was too frail. And I said, man, is this really the way my hero is going to go out? And I just realized that life isn't really, I don't know what the right word is, but it's not fair, man. It's not.
Yeah. It's very sad. And, life is so precious,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Life is precious because, I mean, Pat made a lot of love on the bandstand with you. I mean, and he was just a titan intellectually and philosophically and a hero, but it doesn't always wind up being I guess that's all. I mean, through the meditation and I guess maybe that was the question I had is that did you have a wake-up call early on when you were still real wet behind the ears about being in the moment? Or were you always just driven to serve the song? Sometimes, especially if you're in a gig like, it's the same, you're playing top 40 stuff or you're playing the same gig, it can get and no one's really paying attention, you can mail it in. But did you have an early wake-up call about being in the now as it related to music?
Well, yeah, I did. And as we spoke earlier about, like in 1969, when I was really opening up to the whole progressive music scene, jazz, rock, progressive music, at the same time, Ram Dass was on the scene. Ram Dass, the spiritual man. So I was reading those books, and I got as I mentioned earlier, very much into spiritualism and yogic philosophy and doing yoga. And it sort of happened at the same time that I was on the mission to play music. And it made me realize the importance of music and the spiritualness of music. So I think it happened simultaneously for me. It was a wake-up call about everything. It was about going deeper inside and outside, as well as with the music that I was experiencing at the time. So between those two things, it was a big wake-up call about how to really go forward and try to really become self-realized,
Well, because in my interviews with Michael Shreve, Larry Coryell, Felix Cavallari, and McLaughlin, I mean, they all were seeking teachers to be able to access a spiritual plane of music without hard drugs. Some of them worked, some of it didn't work. But did you have a teacher?
No, not formally a teacher. I didn't have a guru, but I was into transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
And I followed different people, but not as a.
I did. No, I that's very, because I mean,
devotees,
they were, I mean, because like those guys, 10 years, I mean, you said you got got going on this in like 79. Is that what you said? When did you get into Ram Dass?
69.
69. Yeah. So those guys, I mean, those guys were like seeing their friends as being roadkill on the side of the road, and they're like, we
Right.
we want to figure out a way to preserve. Have you made it
Right.
to the timeless land of India?
I haven't yet.
Me neither.
But yeah, I'd love to go sometime. You know, when everything gets clear. You know, but you know,
yeah.
I at the time, like in the '70s, early '70s, like John McLaughlin, Mahavishnu he had a guru,
Sri Chinmoy.
Chinmoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a lot of my friends were into that, and I would go to meetings, and I was doing that, but I didn't want to become a member of it. I just thought that took away from being universal in a way. But,
I love it. Yeah, I did.
and then a lot of Ram Dass really rang true to me. So I read a lot of his books, and I read a lot of yoga books, and so that was, for me, that's what it was. And also, I worked with Larry Coryell since 2004 with Larry Coryell Trio.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Till about 2008. And when I first met Larry, he was also studying under Sri Chinmoy and interesting. All those players you mentioned, I played with them, and I'm so lucky to be able to play with these people. You know,
dude, Larry was like, he was doing chanting and I mean, really like heavy Buddhist work. I mean, but these guys were. I mean, even it's just so funny because you. I can't believe you went to Miami. There was just a lot of carnage and insanity, debauchery, whatever you want to call it. I mean, those guys. But man, it was just such a beautiful brotherhood and sisterhood. I just wonder. Well, a couple things before I let you go. I mean, can you just talk about Arjun, his ability to translate, sort of, I remember Densmore telling me that Arjun really had this very amazing ability to fuse sort of Western traditional patterns that would normally show up on a trap set on the tablas along with the traditional Indian rhythms. And I just wanted you to, I mean, even in the free form setting, kirtan is kind of hard to stretch out in, but can you just talk about, do you agree with that? And what is it like to play with Arjun?
Well, I totally agree with John's words about Arjun, because Arjun comes from playing drums and rock. He's played progressive rock as a drummer.
Yeah.
Toured doing that, as you know. And he applied a lot of that groove feel into the tabla, but he also has studied classical tabla, but he plays it more like a drummer. So it has that great groove, and it's one of the reasons why it's so attractive and you want to listen to it. He's got a beautiful groove. And as you know, we did a record together called Dreaming Spirits.
I know. I love it.
And, you know, we hit it off immediately when I first played with Krishna Das, the kirtan player and chanter, I guess you would say. And we didn't have to say anything. He had been playing with Krishna Das for 2 or 3 years before I came into the band to share the bass chair with Mark Gorman. And we just hit it off immediately because I felt like I was playing with a drummer, but yet there were all these ornamentations from, you know, and we just hook up. And I have to say, I've played some of the deepest grooves and deepest music with Arjun.
Wow.
And that was one of the things that we wanted for such a long time to do a duo project. And so that was the impetus to do it. We kept talking about, we got to record, because we do a lot of dates with Krishna Das. And then we finally did it. And, you know, it's some of my most focused, deepest spiritual moments is playing kirtan with Krishna Das and with Arjun playing drums.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and not only just tabla, but he also plays frame drum and he plays log drum and all different instruments. He's just very creative player.
And he's really in a point in his career where he wants to, you know, keep growing and find his really grow in his own way. And I think that, like, you know, I wonder, you know, none of us. I feel like you probably, before the pandemic, were able to kind of pick and choose what gigs you wanted to play, and you stayed fairly busy. And I mean, music is your purpose in life, and it's your healing quality. So, you know, you weren't. I mean, but it wasn't. I'm not saying you took anything for granted, but you were in the flow, and the flow basically. I mean, the faucet turned off for a couple of years, and I just wonder, like in contemplation, being that you are somebody who gets contemplative. Do you have anything that has come up like creatively that you realize you really are chomping at the bit to do? Just collaboratively with your friends, or is there something that you are like, wow, I am so grateful not only to, I mean, we aren't out of it yet, but I am okay, I'm healthy, my friends are okay, and you know what? I really want to do something that never would have even crossed your mind before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, the floodgates closed, you know, with the pandemic as far as traveling and playing live gigs. I only did one gig last summer with Randy Brecker and Gil Goldstein.
Oh my! Where was this gig? How did I miss that gig?
It was out in Long Island.
Oh
and Nino Sinalou played drums, and Randy's wife Ada played saxophone. It was really great.
What a burnt! Wait, there was no trap set?
He played a trap set, but like with a percussion approach. You know, it was great.
Well, I'm sorry, but who was playing percussion?
Mino Sinalou.
Oh, Mino Sin. Okay, beautiful. Burning.
Yeah, it was burning. And so, but you know, over this whole thing, I've been very busy because I have a home studio. So I've been doing tracks for people and staying very creative and working all the time. But the big thing is, I miss my friends. I miss my musician friends.
I know,
and
man.
Playing and hanging and. You know, to answer or talk about the question about is there some project specific that you want to do? I'm working on a new record that I want to do. I have a duo record I want to do with Danny Gottlieb. Another one we did our most recent record was released during the pandemic. It's called Electric Blue, and it's just Danny Gottlieb and myself.
Are you kidding me? I gotta hear that.
Oh, I'll send it to you.
Oh, please, man. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and we actually, I have a record label. I have 25 releases on it, and it's on this release, I decided to put it out as vinyl as well, so I have it in vinyl. And
I need a copy on vinyl. I need a copy on vinyl.
Yeah. And it's the most successful record I've ever done.
Really?
I think people were hostage at home. And they had to listen to something. I don't know. But, you know, it's just Danny and I started documenting our duo playing and if you want to call it our legacy, whatever, just from playing together so many duo things. But we also did many, right before COVID, we went into the studio and we recorded a lot, and I have enough for a whole nother project for that. But in general, I want to get out and play. I have a tour that's scheduled right now for the end of April in Northern Ireland with Adam Nussbaum playing drums.
Wow.
It's with a great trumpet player named Lindley Hamilton, and he's from Belfast. And it's with a quintet that we're going to be playing, and you know, this relates back to what you said earlier about doing a record and rehearsing or playing it before you actually go in the studio. And what we're going to do is we're going to tour for the first part of it, and then we're going to go into the studio, so it's like a mini version of that. So,
how many shows before you go into the studio?
Not that many, about 3 shows, I think.
Yeah, it's a mini version of the Metheny gig. Yeah,
it's very mini, like 3 days, 3 years. You know.
I needed to ask you about this cat because I swear, I mean, this dude is a hero. Walter Bishop Jr.
Yes, Walter Bishop
Dude,
Jr.
I'm telling you, man, the man. I just have to tell you a funny story. There was a record label called Black Jazz Records. It was run by Gene Russell, and there were all these unsung cats on it, like Doug Carr, Henry the Skipper Franklin, a lot of West Coast guys, Chester Thompson from Tower of Power, and Walter Bishop Jr. did a couple of insane albums on it, early 70s.
Nice.
And the drummer was Alan Schwartzberg.
Alan, yeah.
All right, but on the album they spelled his last name Schwartzbanger. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It was like, but I mean, tell me how those sessions, was that like a radio registry call? Like, how did you get the call on that?
I did a record. called, I forget, I did 2 records with Walter Bishop Jr. On Muse Records, I think.
That's right. No, I'm looking at it right here. It's he got a Cubicle is one.
Cubicle, yep.
Cubicle was one, and I'll look for the other. But I mean, like, had you been playing live with him, or was that like a radio registry?
No.
Yeah.
It wasn't Radio Registry. For those who don't know Radio Registry, there was a phone service in New York that if you joined as a musician, and contractors would call Radio Registry, and they would in turn call you. So I would get a call from Radio Registry, but they didn't call me for that particular record date. Mitch Farber, a really great keyboard player, arranger, and David Matthews were involved with that, and I had been playing with them. And so it was a case of a producer calling the people, and he knew me. And
dude, you were on Dune. You played on Dune, David Matthews. I've been trying to get Matthews on the program, man. That guy's insane.
Yep, on Dune, yep.
So that was just.
And I played in Dave Matthews' big band as well when I first came up into New York.
Oh, man. And that's the thing. I mean, going back to what we talked about before. I mean, yeah, I've done a bunch of interviews with Brecker. I mean, God, those lofts, $60 a month. You could, on a good week in the studios, you could make that in 1 week, and then you could go out and play in the clubs. And so it was like there was money. It was commerce based, and that's the point.
Exactly.
And I don't like this whole idea that music is some sort of musician's gift to the world. I mean, it's
right.
It's so much bigger than that, and I can only hope that that on the other side of this, there is some kind of newfound appreciation, especially from people that have the deep wallets
right.
for quality music,
exactly.
you know?
Yes. I know, an example like of what things were like from the early 80s to the mid to late 90s. At the peak for me of doing studio work, which would range from doing a record date, midday, or jingle in the morning, a television jingle, radio jingle, and then a record in the afternoon, and then a gig at night. My heaviest week, I did 21 record dates in a week.
That is insane.
So I did that for about 18 years in New York. And so,
dude, that's insane, man. Oh my God.
That's after the Pat Metheny, after being on the road and doing the $300 days a year. I said, I'm going to stay in New York for a while, and so I gradually got acquainted to the contractors and everything, and so there were so many opportunities. And getting back to what we talked about as far as opportunities now, and the world has changed. So, now everybody has their own home studio. There's no studio scene in New York like the way it was. It's completely different now. But
go ahead. Yeah. No, please.
No, it's just a thought that I had while we were talking was, you were talking earlier about how people take a long time to do a record, many takes and doing things over and over and over and over again.
Over and over and over.
Right. And for me, being in the pit, in the trenches, playing record dates, and for me, the way that the creativity works as far as when you go past the point of you've got your take, let's say your part and you've played it with everyone and everyone's familiar with it. It's about after the first, second, third take, you've lost the moment.
Absolutely.
You've lost the moment, and you're trying to go back and think about what you did before, so you're trying to play like the last take. So, it's when you get to a certain ability on the instrument, you have to be sensitive to not going past the point of the take.
And that's where I think it doesn't matter what genre of music. That's where a good engineer or producer comes in and says, "No, we're done. You're done. That's good. That's what it is." You don't. Yeah. Because the musician may want to go on for 16 takes, but it was just like it just goes back to that even before Egan. I mean, it's just like I always just go back to the cats like Sonny Stitt and like. These guys that were Joe Henderson, like it was, the language was internalized. So they were riffing off the cuff, and it didn't matter if it was on the Bandstand or at Rudy Van Gelder's. It was just like, there was no thinking going on. It was just.
No, they were living the music.
They were living it. That's exactly right. That's exactly, and you know what? And bless you, man, because you know what? You caught that too. Because, everything really, after 9/11 everything kind of went away. But in the 90s, there was still a studio scene, like you said. You're doing 20 record dates a week from 81 to 95 or whatever.
Right.
And so it's just, and I'm not trying to turn back the clock, but I think you're blessed and you're lucky to have experienced that, because it's different now. And I'm all in for the Cats. So, I mean, Mark, I'd love to do set 2 with you down the road once maybe you get back from the tour in Ireland. We got more to do.
I'd love to. Yeah. No, we're just scratching the surface.
We're just scratching the surface, man. And and I knew we'd have a ball, man. And
yes.
much love to you. Be safe, and and I'll send you my address and stuff. You can send me a vinyl. I'd love to hear the you and Gottlieb thing.
Yes, and much love to you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak and for the inspiring conversation.
Absolutely, brother. Much love, man.
Thank you, Jake.
All right, be cool. Later.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Tremendous day on the Jake Feinberg Show. Jesse Aycock, and then the legendary Mark Egan. Thank you to Arjun Brugman for hooking that up. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show, and we will see you later.